listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I am your host. I am your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday, right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network and our growing family of broadcast affiliates, including the X-Zone Broadcast Network, the Talkstar Radio Network, and the Digital Broadcast Network. Now, you can always send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And, of course, you can listen to the X-Zone archives. You can find out what we've been doing in the past, what we're doing in the present, and what we will be doing in the future at www.xzoneradio.com. Man, do we have an interesting hour for you, X-Zone Nation, this first hour of this week. We're going to be joined by SUZANNE RAMSEY and Scott RAMSEY. We're going to be talking about their book entitled The Aztec UFO Incident. Now, just imagine this. It's the high desert of New Mexico, March 25th, 1948. It's early in the morning, and a rancher leaves his house to let his goats out of the corral. Now, there's a loud noise that draws his eyes to the sky where he sees a silver flying saucer warbling as if in distress. The saucer escapes across a rock cliff, causing sparks. It then heads north and lands on a mesa. There are a group of witnesses gathered to examine the craft, including ranchers, oil field workers, police, a county commissioner, and a preacher. They find that the craft is intact except for a hole the size of a quarter. They quickly grab a pole from one of the trucks and began poking inside the craft. Suddenly, the craft opens and reveals 2 slumped over dead beings. As if this isn't amazing enough, there is much more to this comprehensive study and documentation of the historical event. Joining me now to tell us more about this fascinating event is Suzanne Ramsey. And Suzanne, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. We've been looking forward to this.
As we looking forward to talking to you about this most amazing book that you've written with Scott and Dr. Frank Thayer. How did you guys get involved in this?
Well, each of us was a little bit different path. Scott started out on a trip to New Mexico. He actually was in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those magical moments when there was an interruption in his trip, and he wasn't going to be able to fly home to North Carolina, and he ended up flying down to visit a new customer down in Farmington, New Mexico. And while he was there, he overheard a couple people talking about the fact of they were going to go for the weekend out to the old crash site to do some hunting. And he questioned them what crash site, and they said, oh, there's an old wives' tale that there was a crashed flying saucer. Well, he had the weekend, didn't have anything to do, and so he decided that he would go and do some exploring. And as he did some exploring, tried to locate it, the location and things, in his mind, now keep in mind this was 30 years ago, you know, we all have high expectations when we're young. His thoughts were, I'll have this wrapped up whether it happened or it didn't happen in 6 months. You know, thankfully sometimes we have that optimistic insight, or I don't think we'd ever get started on a project, you know. And so
true.
That's how Scott got started on it. And I actually lived in the Farmington Aztec area. And as a child, my mom was reading Frank Scully's book. It was about 10 years after the book came out. We were living up in South Dakota, and she was reading the book, and so I was familiar with it. When my folks decided to move south to get a little warmer weather, she said, you know, I read that interesting book about Aztec, New Mexico, and I wonder if there's any truth to it. I'd love to move down there. And so when they were, you know, scoping out where they were going to move, that's where they looked at, and they decided they would move to Aztec. So they got there, and my mom was really disappointed because nobody talked about it, and everybody pretty much, you know, scoffed at it. So she was really disappointed, and it was, you know, that had been covered up by that time, and so that was the situation.
Suzanne, please stand by. We've got to take our first break. X Zone Nation. Suzanne and Scott Ramsey are our special guests. They, along with Dr. Frank Thayer, have written The Aztec UFO Incident. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue this fascinating investigation into a UFO crash. Don't go away. Afterlife expert Roberta Grimes was the first one to say that dying can be fun. Now her best-selling book, The Fun of Dying, is available in stores worldwide. So if you wonder whether death ends life, how it feels to die, or what heaven might be like, The Fun of Dying was written for you. And if you have always been afraid of death, or if you worry that your life has no meaning, let The Fun of Dying ease your fears and bring new meaning to your life. Nothing said in The Fun of Dying is based on the teachings of any religion. Instead, Roberta draws on evidence to explain how death happens, how it feels, and what comes next. A lot of the best death-related evidence was produced in the first half of the 20th century. When it is put together with recent discoveries, it tells a consistent and amazing story. Roberta Grimes blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Her wonderful book, The Fun of Dying, is available on Amazon and at stores worldwide wherever books are sold. You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Starr began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea Starr does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you are able to give factual information, and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Starr does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Starr or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com. Welcome back, everyone. Scott and Suzanne Ramsey are our special guests this hour, along with Dr. Frank Thayer. They have written The Aztec Incident, and we're speaking to Suzanne right now. And thanks very much for joining us, Suzanne. But let's just finish about your move to the area where this alleged crash at the time happened. And your mom was a little disappointed that nobody was talking about it?
No, anybody you asked,
I see.
It was pretty much no one would talk about it, and it was a pretty quiet topic. Nobody was interested in talking about it. And she was really disappointed because that book was so important to her,
sure,
and all those years before, and she recalled it. And so, but in time, as she got to know more people, there were certain people that would talk about it, and then certainly when Scott came to town, he was on my radio show, and he was doing research about it, and so it's really interesting that my mom was so interested in that, and just by happenstance, Scott and I got together. So,
and people say there's no such thing as destiny.
I know. I tell you what's interesting was for several years we must have passed each other at different functions and different events, and just wasn't the right time. But it's really interesting because I don't know of many married couples that would have either the sanity or insanity to work together for, we've been married, we're coming up on 13 years, and all but 2 of our honeymoon days we have worked on this, and so it's pretty much an everyday occurrence in our life.
So let me see, I've heard about people meeting on Match.com, I've heard of people meeting on eHarmony.com, but I guess this is the first one of UFOincident.com.
Well, I tell you, I guess so, and what I think is interesting, though, is it must have just been meant whatever powers that be that we came together to work on this project. Because, like I said, it takes a lot of dedication, money,
Right.
time, and commitment. And there's a lot of other things you could be doing with that money. And we've just decided that we don't have children, but this is kind of going to be something that we can pass on, an important part of history.
A legacy to the world.
Yeah.
Talk
There's some
about
really
being great.
important things that happened in history, and they were missed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. So let me ask Scott a few questions here,
Sure.
Suzanne.
Let me pass it on.
All right.
Hello, Rob.
Hey, Scott. Welcome to the X Zone. Great having you and Suzanne here. So tell us, Scott, what really happened in Aztec?
Well, from 30-some years of research, what we've pieced together, approximately 5 o'clock in the morning on March 25th, 1948, a very large craft in comparison to what had been seen in the area prior, was in some type of trouble, first spotted by Manuel Sandoval down in Cuba, New Mexico, about 95 miles southeast of Aztec. Later seen by local rancher Valentin Archuleta in Blanco at his big ranch, where it was, again, acting as though it was out of control, fluttering like a leaf as it came down to a lower altitude, and a bad attitude. It was kind of bouncing around. And it struck a mesa on the southwestern side of his ranch. And he claimed that sparks flew in the early morning sky, and then the craft kind of darted due north toward Hart Canyon, where Valentin went down to the Blanco Mercantile store, and they had an access phone 24 hours for the ranchers to use. And with the help of the operator, they called Kirkland Air Force Base and said, hey, one of these flying, discs that you have such an interest in just hit a mesa behind my ranch. And they took down the information and assured him that they would follow up. They asked him which direction it was flying. He said, due north, and they said, what give us a reference? And he said, due north toward Hart Canyon. Last he ever heard of the Air Force. And about 10 to 5 that morning, Doug Nolan was on his way to Bill Ferguson's house, his boss, to go out and check some oil wells. And they got redirected real quick to Hart Canyon Road because there was a brush fire near some drip tanks, the company drip tanks. So they scurry on out there, and as they get out there, they're told by other oil field workers that got there ahead of time that the brush fire had no implications to the storage tanks because the fire was up on top of a mesa, not down where the oil tanks are. But the employees said, what you really need to do is get up here because there's something up here we can't explain. And anyway, as they made their way up on top of the mesa, there was a large lenticular disc, to quote Doug Nolan, very thin cross-section, very large, 100 feet across, flying saucer laying on the mesa where it looked like it had come in and kind of shoveled its way with the outer edge, knocking down some trees. And at that point, Doug said he didn't know if this was now a rescue mission or what. They never thought flying saucer for 1 minute. They figured, being 1948, that this was some kind of prototype top-secret test vehicle from the United States military.
Did anybody take any photos?
Photos were taken of the craft, yes.
Where are the photos?
I know they still exist. I would believe that they're sitting in California at somebody's house.
How do you move a 100-foot UFO?
That's a big task. And that's a long chapter in our book back in, was it 2010? We reenacted the moving of the craft. Yeah. And that was one that we were kind of sitting around one night talking, and we were starting on the book, the first book that came out in 2012, and I said to Suzanne, this whole thing is not going to be doable or believable unless we move the craft. So basically, we hired Bill Metzger from Confluence, Pennsylvania. He was a world-renowned expert in moving large objects, and he and his wife, Pam, met us in Aztec for a week, and we, with flatbed trucks and pinch rods and measuring tapes, we reenacted moving it based on the original description in Frank Scully's 1950 book, Behind the Flying Saucers. And even though it was extremely tight, sometimes we were clearing the canyon walls by 3 inches on each side, but it was doable.
Is it possible that this craft was actually a terrestrial prototype of some sort of new aircraft?
Well, if it weren't for the fact that Doug and Ferguson and Ken Farley and other people that were at the crash site that day were able to peer in through a broken porthole. It was a mirrored-like glass, sort of like mirrored sunglasses.
Yeah.
They actually saw 2 aliens slumped over. I say that alien, that's not really fair. 2 childlike bodies slumped over a control panel. And later, after they poked around the craft and released a door, a set of staircases, they were able to look up on another level and see other bodies of childlike beings.
Did anybody try to remove them?
No. They were being yelled at by an older rancher couple, Mr. and Mrs. Knight, that had a lease out there to run cattle, that were telling, these are young kids, 19, 20, 21 years old, with the exception of Bill Ferguson.
Right.
And, of course, they wanted to be heroes and go up inside the craft and kind of investigate what it was, and the Knights were yelling and screaming, get away from it, get away from the craft. So Doug said that was as far as they got. And then it wasn't that long after, it was late morning or early lunchtime period, that the military showed up. And to have the military show up that quick is almost like they tracked it and knew where it was, or they took Valentin Archuletta's phone call very serious.
Or if it was an experimental craft, they would have been tracking it, like you said, and they saw the craft, just disappear off radar. And so, all right. So these young or small people were lumped over the control panels. Did anybody see their faces, or did and what did they look like?
The bodies, according to Doug. Now, keep in mind, I'm interviewing these people at the end of their life span, and like in Doug's case, he was quite old. Ken Farley and Doug, they died shortly after we interviewed him in '99 and 2003. Alien maybe as far as height, 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Large head, but more of a childlike face, not your Hollywood stereotypical large eyes, big head, body. And they were wearing jumpsuits, blue jumpsuits, Doug's recollection was.
Was there any debris in a debris field, or was it just all intact with the...
Yes, this thing, every witness we ever talked to said the craft was... it seemed to be virtually intact. It didn't have a landing gear or any support structure deployed. It was almost like it just made it to the mesa, landed without boring you to death. Over the years, we've almost thought it was landing remotely because of descriptions of how it fluttered, and then it would straighten up, and then it hit the Archuleta Ranch, and then went almost... Valentin told Bill Stein, almost perfectly straight after that toward Hart Canyon.
Were there any markings of any kind on the craft?
3 gold rings around the center, the circumference of the craft, which Doug said always intrigued him. He didn't know whether they had anything to do with the propulsion or possibly antenna. The craft was a very, very smooth finish. Doug described it, it looked as though the craft had been molded. No seams, no rivets, no screws, no bolts. And then at the center of this object, these 3 gold rings.
Scott, please stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour, but you'll be back on the other side with Suzanne. But Exo Nation, if you'd like to get a copy of the Aztec UFO incident, it's available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores nationally. For more information, visit theaztecincident.com. That's www.theaztecincident.com. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Mutual Broadcast Network, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, and the Digital Broadcast Network and Digital Satellite Network. Don't go away.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Thomas Jefferson was a Burgess of 27 when he met Martha Wales Skelton, a 22-year-old widowed heiress who was fondly called Patty by her family. They were married on January the 1st, 1772, and they took up residence in a cabin on the building site on top of a Virginia mountain that Thomas had named Monticello. As Thomas and Patty slowly built their first version of the great house at Monticello, the Revolutionary War was heating up. Patty, with difficulty, bore 5 children, but only 2 girls survived. Thomas's political career developed to the point where he was often away from home, but after he authored and signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, he resolved never again to leave his wife. He was elected the governor of Virginia, just as that state became the Revolution's last battleground. The Revolutionary War ended in 1781, and Thomas gladly retired altogether to my family, my farm, and my books. But Patty continued to want to bear her treasured husband a son, and late in the summer of 1782, she died of kidney failure at the age of 33, 4 months after having borne yet another girl. Thomas was so devastated by her death that he never remarried. He mourned her for the rest of his life, even as he helped to frame the peace in France and then became the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States. This story is true. Thomas Jefferson was such an obsessive letter writer and record keeper that we know where he was and what he was doing nearly every day of his adult life. Every significant thing he says in My Thomas comes from his contemporary writings. My Thomas by Roberta Grimes is now available at Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Books A Million, Hudson Booksellers, Kmart, Walmart, Sam's Club, Walgreens, CVS, and online at Amazon.com. You can visit Roberta Grimes online at www.robertagrimes.com.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Unwilling to be the government's deadly assassin, gifted psychic Kahara Mitchell went AWOL and ended up buried under rubble in the wake of a great tsunami. She regained consciousness far from Earth on the medical ship of a Daguerrean intergalactic fleet. Has she been rescued or abducted by aliens? The Chalice of Carrie, Kahira O'Donnell's latest paranormal science fiction romance, is the passionate story of an Earth woman and her destined mates, twin kings from another galaxy. Kahara uses her gifts fighting alongside Lords Ram and Ra in a war that will determine the destiny of galaxies. The Chalice of Carrie by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or at Amazon.com. You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. What Happened in Benghazi is revealed by Nicholas Genix, author of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. He informs the American people that President Obama deceived them by advocating a strong foreign policy prior to the 2012 presidential election, and Hillary Clinton supported this deception. As the title infers, there is a connection between Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. Ample evidence informs Americans that Obama's early indoctrination in the Quran developed an affinity for Islam, why the Quran is the source of discontent in many countries, and why the Obama foreign policy deception led to poor military action and caused the loss of American lives in Benghazi. Genix provides 36 questions for the Select Committee on Benghazi to validate if Americans are justified to mistrust President Obama and Hillary Clinton. An overview of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi is presented on the website www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Annie Callahan, dedicated to negotiating a position for Earth within the Daguerrean Coalition, had trained for 3 years to become an Earth ambassador. Yet, the very eve of her arrival at the capital ruling planet, she is claimed as destined mate to an oversized, mating-maddened vamp who swears he will never release her. Lord Aztaran, king of the Macian sector, has waited over 900 years for his destined mate. Having found her as an alpha vamp, he is unable to relinquish Annie, virtually holding her hostage until he can claim her. Yet Macians cannot survive without their mate's love. How could he strip her of her citizenship, her ambassadorship, and her freedom and expect to win her heart? With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is the latest book in this exciting series, The Daguerrean Chronicles, guaranteed to keep readers coming back for more. With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is available on Amazon.com and KahiraO'Donnell.com. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about the Aztec UFO incident that occurred in Aztec, New Mexico, March 25th, 1948, in the early hours of the morning. My two guests this hour, Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, along with Dr. Frank Thayer, wrote the Aztec UFO incident. It's available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores nationally. And check out their website, theaztecincident.com. Now, Scott, you say that you have over 55,000 documents pertaining to the crash or this incident. What type of documents are they?
A mixed bag of everything. Interviews with the people that were involved in the Aztec UFO flying saucer incident. Employment records to verify that they were, in fact, working in the area at the time. We pulled tax records from the county to make sure they lived where they said they lived and they were paying their real estate taxes, just to weed out people that may have had a tall tale to tell us. A lot of FBI, CIA, Army CID documents that we painstakingly requested and received over the years. Many trips down to Maxwell Air Force Base to get documents and copies and historical reports. And there's probably way more than 55,000. That was 5 or 6 years ago, and we cataloged it all.
Here we are, another UFO incident. Let's see, Roswell, 1947, Aztec, 1948. Still, we're no closer to establishing the fact that these UFOs were extraterrestrial. Do you think that there is a government conspiracy in place? And if so, why?
I definitely do. You can see that as you go through the records. Some new ones we just received, actually one dated, thanks to the very handy work of a researcher out in California that just sent it to me. One dated, ironically, March 25th, 1948, by the Joint Chiefs, saying effective immediately we're now having a different process of how we report flying saucers, and I just found it hilarious. It's the same date as the Aztec. I think back then in 48, we were right at the beginning of the Cold War. I mean, it was ramping up pretty good. Yeah. We had a lot of Russian spies in New Mexico at the time. That's been proven. They're there to watch what's going on at the Trinity site at White Sands, which is all in the one same piece of property, basically. Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, a lot of super-secret test facilities, 3 radar installations that we did a historical deal on and uncovered. A lot of things going on, and I think that to announce to the world that we recovered something with this amazing, and I'm going out on a limb here, probably amazing technology of propulsion and powering system, I don't think you want to share that with the rest of the world.
But once again, here we are, 1948, the crash happened. We're now in 2016. How come there hasn't been any information or proof leaked?
Oh, well, I think that's how you interpret the information. We interviewed a gentleman in January that claimed in 1958 he worked on the craft at Wright-Patterson. And so far, we can't poke any holes in his story. He and his wife have presented their documents that I always request, the employment records for the company he worked for at the time. He was a contractor that was working at Wright-Pat. Real estate records check out. His wife backs up the story. And he said 1948, 10 years after the recovery, they had still not figured out everything on this craft. Very little they had figured out.
Now, are your witnesses subjected to a polygraph?
No, I never have.
Psychological stress evaluator?
No.
It's just...
Don't forget, when we're talking my witnesses, we're dealing with 83 to 95-year-old people.
Isn't that strange that all these witnesses that finally come forward are so old that if this if this craft is still around somewhere, wouldn't there be a younger group of people who could also give validity to these claims?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if they want to put their neck out on the line, they could. And of course, that's something we always hope will happen.
Once again, with Edward Snowden and the other hackers that are out there, the other whistleblowers, none of these have come forward with proof that the United States government or any other government is suppressing information that they do in fact have flying saucers from another universe, another place in space.
Right.
Wouldn't this be very detrimental to the government, for example, if China was to have their hackers hack into the government database, find proof that the American government has been suppressing this information, and they leak it to the public. That would,
Rob, I don't think we need the Chinese to show us that. If you go through a lot of the documents we have and other documents other researchers have, we've got one that reminds the Air Force Intelligence, AISS, that any information that is viable does not go to Wright-Patterson for Project Blue Book. It remains here at Air Force.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand. But these are old documents. Like, I mean something that is new, up to date, that the intelligence agency's benchmark would be on it. You know, it's just like the story about Roswell. There are so many holes in that case, as far as I'm concerned, and other people are concerned, that when these stories are told, a lot of the information is not reported as it was.
Sure, I agree.
So,
I totally agree.
Yeah, so, like, how do we take these sightings, these crashes, seriously? They happened, like I said, in 1948. I'm not aware of any recent UFO crashes. It's
Pittsburgh 65. I bet there's a lot of good proof surrounding that.
Yeah, but once again, even in 1965, there is no smoking gun. There's not a smoking gun with any of them. That's what I'm getting at.
It's all circumstantial.
But with the technology we have today, with all the webcams, with all the cell phones that have cameras in it, all the closed-circuit televisions that are all over the place, you would think that by now there would be that smoking gun, unless these visitors are using some other technology, a masking technology, a cloaking technology.
Well, that's been discussed for many years. There's photos that resurfaced here within the last year or so of the 1950 famous Farmington Armada that overflew the town of Farmington.
Yeah.
And these were taken with.
Hello?
Those I've ever seen. But you're right. The other ones, they're blurry. They're this, they're that. But I can't answer the question. Our whole focus in life is on the Aztec. Have you read our book?
I've read part of it. I've read part of it. But
the new one that just came out.
Yeah, I've read part of it.
Yeah.
But once again, I can't understand why there is only all this information on the older cases that happened directly after the Cold War. Or I mean after World War II.
Right, exactly.
And nothing since. Like you said, Kecksburg, yes, that's a good one. Okay, there's a lot of questions there. You see, I think that if... I don't know where the conspiracy is, or the cover-up. Is the cover-up with the government, or is the cover-up with the UFO community itself? Because as long as there's a conspiracy or cover-up in place, you don't have to provide the evidence, because the evidence is being suppressed. Just like when we look at the older cases when it comes to UFOs, you had the Men in Black. I haven't heard about a Man in Black case for years. We had cattle mutilation. Cattle aren't being mutilated anymore to the extent they used to be. We had the chupacabras. We had alien abductions left, right, and center.
Right.
What happened?
I think if you refer back to our book, you'll see that there was a sting operation in downtown Denver by CIA, FBI, United States Army, CID. And all these resources were put together to confiscate pictures of their words, not mine, Aztec flying saucer. They were intercepting a sale by L.D. McLaughlin to a reporter named Klein at the Baltimore Sun. Enormous resources went into that. We spent years declassifying documents, interviewing reporters, retired reporters from the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Sun-Times.
Right.
They never sent a reporter out. So whoever this person was posing as a reporter was not from Baltimore. But when you look at the enormous resources that were put into place to confiscate some black and white photos, you question yourself and say, how important is this?
Well, my question is, what jurisdiction does the CIA have on homeland territory?
None.
Exactly.
Technically.
So
none.
Is this hype? Is this hype? Because, here we are talking 1948, right after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
The CIA would have bigger and better things to do than to worry about things that flew in the sky, especially since the end of the war.
Well, the documents aren't hoax. They came right from the FBI and the Army CID. After, I may add, a long, almost legal battle. Threats of a legal battle.
All right, but when it comes to national security, do you think that the CIA, the FBI, or any other governmental agency is actually going to give out any information, even though it's under the Freedom of Information Act? A lot of businesses have a dual set of books.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't the government have a dual set of files?
Oh, or triple or
Right.
quad, sure.
Right. So what are we trying to establish here? That UFOs are real, that extraterrestrials are real, or that the government is perpetrating a cover-up and conspiracy?
Well, I think the flying saucers are real. I think it would be a stretch for all of us to assume they're extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest one we can reach out and grab and say, oh, they must be from another planet.
But are they flying saucers or are they UFOs? Because a UFO is strictly an unidentified flying object.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what it is.
Right.
Whereas when we say flying saucer, then the public assumption is that they're from another planet. And that brings us right back to Kenneth Arnold's sighting. Did he actually see UFOs or flying saucers, or was it a misidentification?
Well, one thing's for sure. Whatever he saw back then, if we had the technology to do it back then, we wouldn't have jet fighters today, would we?
We don't know that for a fact. Because there were jet fighters in Germany.
Mm-hmm. The Messerschmitt P-260.
So why is it that we have to give credit to an extraterrestrial race for our own ingenuity? If, in fact, there was reverse engineering, why are we using solid rocket propellant? Why are we sending these probes to Mars? If, in fact, we do have this ET reverse engineering stuff.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Well, it goes back to 1958 when a gentleman was at Wright-Patterson, and he said very little of this craft we figured out in 1958.
But do we know for a fact that the craft he was talking about was, in fact, the same craft that people allege crashed in Aztec?
Oh, it was referred to in their meetings as the one recovered from Aztec, New Mexico.
But once again, what documentation corroborates what he said about the craft being from the Aztec UFO?
You have to take a 93-year-old man's word for it, I guess.
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
As an ex-criminal investigator, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I want to believe. Believe me, I want to believe, but I want proof.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all do.
Sure.
Of course. Look how many years we've put into the research.
Exactly. How close do you think you are to getting that final smoking piece of gun piece?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, in the back of your mind, you say, oh, the next couple of years, look how much we've gained. The book came out in February, and we've had 5 good leads since. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you're going to be any closer to proving it.
Yeah. You must be frustrated at times.
No, actually not. We just enjoy doing the research, and jumping on airplanes and traveling and interviewing people and going through archives. And, there is a lot of fun to doing that.
Yeah. What stands out most for you about your research?
What stands out?
Yeah.
God, there's so many. I think the amount of documents that are sitting down at Maxwell Air Force Base that since 1999 when I first went, that we've been denied, that are specific to Aztec.
Okay, let me ask you a question here. When it comes to a matter of national security, do you think the government should hand over everything it has?
Absolutely not. I've said that in every lecture I've ever done. And if I don't bring it up, the crowd does and say, And I said, well, you're going to hear a double standard right now.
No, I don't think it's a double standard. I think it's a very respectful and responsible standard.
It's if we, the researchers, can find it through whatever loophole we can, then I think good for us. But I do not. I mean, Los Alamos is a customer of mine. I've been going up there for 30 years. And they're very nice people. I work on projects that are not weapons related. But to see how compartmentalized they are, one building doesn't know what the next building is doing. And that's the way it should be. And as a supplier, I come through the main gate, I go into a little cubicle, and I talk to either engineering or purchasing, and when we're done, I turn around, I walk out, take the shuttle bus back to my car, and go home.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think just because, and I had to laugh, you see what's going on down here with our politics.
We watch it.
Candidate says, if you elect me, I'll open up all the UFO cases. Come on, you're a part-time employee, for crying out loud. But it's good news. You know, it's good news coverage.
But listen, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you guys very much for this great entertainment. It sure as hell beats the O.J. Simpson trial we watched.
We do entertain the world, don't we?
Well, and you know what? Our thoughts and prayers are with you all. Hey, listen, Scott, we've got to take our final break. Great having you with us, and I really admire and respect your point of view.
Well, thanks, Rob. Thanks for having us.
Hey, listen.
Are you going to have Suzanne back on?
Yes, I am. So thank you, Scott. Exo Nation, our two very special guests tonight, Scott Ramsey and his wife, Suzanne. We're talking about the Aztec UFO incident. Their website is www.aztecincident.com, and their book is entitled The Aztec UFO Incident. It's available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere. My name is Rob McConnell. This is The X Zone. We'll be back as we wrap up this hour on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multi-family dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement. These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com. Exonation, my two guests this hour are two of the three authors of an exciting book entitled The Aztec UFO Incident. Our guests this hour, Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, with Dr. Frank Thayer wrote the book, which is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores nationally, and their website is www.theaztecincident.com. Suzanne, I'm going to ask you the same question, the last question I asked Scott, and that is, what stands out the most for you about your research?
For me, I think it's the impact that it had on the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
You get a wide range from the witnesses and the impact it had on them immediately and then in time to come, as well as the scientists that worked on it, to Frank Scully, the original person that wrote about it. And then, when I jump back to the impact that it had on the scientists, a group of the scientists that worked on it very shortly after started what became Texas Instruments. So it affected all of us in that way. Do you know where I'm going with that?
Well, isn't that a bit of a leap from, basically saying, well, they started Texas Instruments with the information that they acquired through the investigation of a UFO?
I'm just saying they did that after having worked on the craft, and I think that's very interesting. And I personally feel like you asked me my personal opinion, and that's for me. I think that's a way that it impacted them. So, I just getting to know these people both through their history and through other people that knew them very well, and family members, and through records, and you see some remarkable things. There's one gentleman that actually, he worked on the project, a scientist, and was very quiet and very reserved and very well known internationally. And when he worked on papers or research, he would always put his name at the bottom, including students above himself. Never wanted any attention to himself. A lot of times left his name off papers.
Right.
And when it came down to going down, and he was in the Southwest during that exact time, we have records documenting that. He came back and he called a conference worldwide and said, got his fellow scientists together and said, I'm going to be the keynote speaker, and I have some very, very important information to share. What I have just seen has changed my life so remarkably. Instead of working for the war effort, which I've done my entire life, I now am going to focus on philanthropic things. And I have seen things that can change how we use energy. We can feed everyone in the world. So those are things that are interesting to me.
But where did he say he had this epiphany? What caused the epiphany?
He was not able to say that. He said, I can't disclose where I was. I've been to the Southwest, and it was during those exact time period, and through other means that we know that he worked on the craft. And so, but again, you're asking for my personal opinion. If you look in the book, we only give you the facts. I'm expressing some things that really had an impact on me.
So what you're saying to me is that in the book you make a direct correlation between the scientists who worked on the craft and to the creation of Texas Instruments.
Well, what you asked me, the question you asked me was, what did I feel had the most impact on me? And that's what I answered. In the book, we stick to only facts that I can give you documents and hand you to tell you exactly this. So there's two different, we don't blur that in the book.
All right, I want to thank you two very much for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. And Exonation, once again, the name of the book is The Aztec UFO Incident. It's available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores nationally, and their website is theaztecincident.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone.